Brilliant. With me this morning is Luke Gratton. I think it was probably about a year ago, I had an email from this guy who was moving back to Derby, who had something to do with compassion and wanted to introduce himself. And in the year since, we've become friends, we've hung out and we've got to know each other. But Luke, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Luke Gratton. I'm in my 40th year. I turned 40 this year, so I've joined you, Phil. You're 2 years
at the club.
So I am head of partnerships for Compassion UK for the Midlands, Wales and Ireland region. So the country's kind of split into 3 different regions. We've got the North and Scotland, Midlands, Wales and Ireland, and then the South. So I head up the Midlands, Wales and Ireland region. And I've been working for Compassion, I think in this role for about 2 years now. So I've been involved in Compassion for many, many years. Kaz is my wife. We've sponsored kids for many years through Compassion. So absolutely love the organization. And then a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to join them in this role.
Luke, many people will have heard about Compassion and know exactly who they are and what they do, but some won't. So can you just give us the spiel? Who are Compassion?
In the nutshell of Compassion. So Compassion is a global organization that basically seeks to release children from poverty in Jesus' name. So we don't shy away from the fact that we are doing it in Jesus' name and from a Christian perspective. We work in 25 different countries around the world at the moment. We've got around about just over 2 million children in compassion programs throughout the world. So when I say compassion program, what I'm talking about is the child development program, which is our sort of core thing that we do as an organization. But the way that compassion operates is everything is through the local church. So if you went to one of the countries that we work in, if you went over to Ghana or to Kenya or anywhere in the world, and you went to one of our projects, you wouldn't necessarily see Compassion branded everywhere. What we want to do is resource the local church to do what it does best, which is to reach the communities for which, where God has called it to be. So we would say that we are child focused. We'd say that we're church based, and we would say that we are Christ centered. So those are the sort of 3 C's of compassion of what we do. So like I say, our primary program is child development, but then we do a lot of other things as well to support the communities that we work in.
Brilliant. Obviously, we are in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes. And
we are aware of the restrictions and the challenges that that's laid to our life and what that means for life here in Derby. Can you give us any insight into how this has affected some of the nations around the world in which Compassion is working?
Yeah, sure. I think the reality is that what has impacted us, you can multiply it tenfold for the developing world. What we're not necessarily seeing right at this moment is the full impact of the virus itself. So, we would, obviously in the UK, our numbers have got up over the sort of 40,000 mark of people who unfortunately have lost their lives to the virus. What we're not necessarily seeing is that same level within the developing world. I'm speaking in particular about Africa at the moment. Obviously, we also work in Latin America and other places, and it is different. But we've not necessarily seen in the developing world as much the death rate from the virus. Now, that could be a number of reasons. One, it might just be that it's not taking its hold as much. The other one, which some news reports are suggesting that it's because we already know that the healthcare systems are very fragile. So the level of testing is going to be nowhere near where we're at in the Western and the developed world. So we just might not know that the virus has taken hold a lot more than we think it has. But what we are seeing is the impact of the virus due to the restrictions that have been put on countries. So if you think, in the developing world, so one of my sponsored children is a young lad called Boaz from Kenya. So his dad is a day laborer. So that's the only way that they have any income coming into the family. So take Boaz's dad, on a normal day without COVID-19, he would go to a local farm or somewhere like that. He would stand in a queue. We all know what standing in a queue feels like now with supermarkets, but he would stand in a queue hoping that day he would get picked out of that lineup and get given some work to do for that day. He would then get a little bit of money, take that back, and then they would buy their food for that day. Now, lockdown comes in, no farms are open, or very few places of work are open. So those people who rely upon day labor, it's just not there anymore. They have no capacity to earn what small money they could for that day to be able to buy some food. So what we're seeing, and the World Food Programme, I sent you through a WhatsApp, didn't I, a few weeks ago, it's staggering the numbers that they are suggesting. That the World Food Programme, the director put out a statement a little while back now, suggesting that there could be around about another 130 million people brought to the brink of starvation, because there's just not the capacity for people to buy food, but also because of inflation going up, because of import and export. Suddenly, what used to cost a few cents now costs quite a bit more, because the import and export is just not there. And so therefore, all of those essential items that maybe a family could scrape together a little bit of money to buy, even if they had that money now, it's out of their reach. So it's huge.
Yeah,
it's absolutely huge, the impact that COVID-19 is having in the developing world.
We hear statistics like that, 130 million, and I just can't get my head around it. I can't. The number's too big, and then we sit here and I get frustrated, as you mentioned, about being in the queue at Aldi trying to get into the shop to do my food shopping, and it puts that all into perspective. But I think one of the questions that a lot of us are asking is, what can we do? And so I wonder what's Compassion doing at the moment, and have you got any stories of situations where you're being able to have an impact?
Yeah, I mean, can I just say, firstly, thank you so much to some Wordbergs, because you did donate some money into the Compassion Global Appeal, and the reason we've chosen to do that appeal as an organization is because, like I said before, everything that we do is really about resourcing the local church. So we know that the best way to combat COVID-19 is through the local church. The local church is the hope of the world. And so what we want to do, even with our global campaign, is resource the local church even further. So as some of the stories, there are lots of stories from the field of how the local church is having to adapt, do things differently in order to continue to serve the poorest of the poor. And I came across a beautiful story from Ethiopia. There's one of our caregivers. So a caregiver is either parents or family members that look after some of the kids that we work with. So this caregiver called Meseret one day was out trying to get some work, just out during the day, trying to do what they can. She's got a 15-year-old daughter who's part of one of our child development centers. So Meseret comes back home that day and comes up to their little hut and notices that there's a different lock on the door. And she's looking at that lock going, where's that lock come from? She goes over, tries her key to get in, can't get in. They'd basically been evicted that day. No warning letter, nothing. So here we have a mum with a 15-year-old daughter, no home. Just evicted because, unfortunately, because she was struggling for work, she wasn't able to pay her rent. And so the landowner or the homeowner had just come, changed the locks, gone. So here's Meseret in a dire situation, but has something within her that says, I'm going to sort this out. I've got to do something here. So she contacts the local church and the local compassion project that's based out of that church, because that's where her daughter goes. That's her first port of call, the local church, which is what we want. We want people to feel as though they can get a hold of the local church. So she contacts them and talks to the project director, who's called Mimi. And Mimi says, hey, come on, Messeret, we can sort this. So Mimi, the project director, the compassion project director, talks with the local church as well. And together they come together and say, right, we're going to cover your rent for the next 6 months.
Wow.
But that wouldn't normally be available unless we have this ability to resource the local church further. Because the local church in the developing world is not rich. They don't have the type of budgets and the cash flows that we do here in the West. And so really that's where organizations like Compassion and others need to be able to resource the local church. And so you say, what can we do at this time? Or what is Compassion doing at this time? Really, it's trying to provide just that additional level of resource to allow that creative thinking and allow the local church to have that resource to be able to adapt to the need that it's currently presented with. So there's other stories of local churches doing food distribution, because again, people are just without food. So let's put together food parcels. Let's get it over. There's a lovely video that Compassion put together about Thailand. Just again, the local church and Compassion coming together and noticing that there's villages over the other side of this lake that don't have natural ability to get food over there, and in lockdown, all transport was locked down. They just didn't have the ability to get food. And so what the local church does is go, I'm not going to allow this. I'm not going to stop at anything in order to make sure that the poorest of the poor are cared for. And so they started to get boats together and take food across to this island so that people weren't starving. So yeah, just amazing things. I heard again in Thailand, another church helping kids learn how to make face masks. Churches in Kenya learning how to make hand sanitizer and distributing that free of charge to families to help them to keep their hands clean. Just the local church doing what it does best.
Yeah, brilliant. Luke, thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. We're at the start of a friendship, but also a working relationship, hopefully a partnership with Compassion, and exploring just what that might look like into the future. But thank you for sharing some thoughts with us this morning. It's been really, really helpful. Is there anything else, just as we finish, other than the kind of the obvious, that you think that we should be praying about?
I think ultimately we are all part of one church, the global church. And so I think, what we need to make sure is that we rise out of this pandemic as one church across the globe. And so I think the one thing that I would be praying for is your colleagues, your church leaders all over the world, people just like yourselves, trying to work out how to navigate this season, how to still build a sense of community, how to serve their communities, how to make sure that you're speaking up for those who have no voice. I think is it Proverbs 31 verse 8 and 9, which says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute, speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So I think, we are the church. And so I would ask you to pray for your colleagues in the developing world who, just like yourselves, are trying to navigate this season, that they wouldn't grow tired and weary of doing good. Because it can be very despondent at times when you're faced with such need to be able to keep your heart and your spirit and your energy levels right. So I think pray that people and your colleagues in the global church don't grow tired of doing good.
Brilliant. Mate, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us this morning, and bless you and all the work that Compassion is involved with at this time.
Thanks, Phil.
Cheers, mate.